Today's daf is daf Yud Aleph, and about 10 lines down from the top. The Gemara quotes the Mishnah, "B'kesef Beit Shammai omer b'dinar u'b'shaved dinar." My tamayu leBeit Shammai. The Gemara now is going to present two different approaches to how to understand Beit Shammai's requirement of a minimum of a dinar for kesef Kiddushin. As far as Beit Hillel is concerned, all you need is a shava pruta, and we have a principle of Eina miskadeshes b'pachas mishava pruta, because pruta is the bottom line definition, the cheapest and most inexpensive kesef. And less than that, it's not called kesef, and it's not royal kinyan. And in dini mamadis in general, the shear of pruta is always the shear of mammon. But what about Beit Shammai? Beit Shammai all of a sudden drops the ball on shava pruta and instead requires a dinar. And that's a dinar shel kesef. Later on, we'll see exactly how much of a value does a dinar shel kesef have. But in any event, what's the logic that underlies Beit Shammai? Amar Rav Zera, shekein isha makpedes al atzma v'ein miskadeshes b'pachos midinar. And the Gemara understands Rav Zera in the following way, that a woman would find it an insult to receive for marriage less than a dinar, because a dinar is a matbeah chashuv. And even if, let's say, she would say, okay, you know what, for me, it's all right, I'll willingly be part of this marriage, accept this marriage, even with pachas midinar, it's not valid. Eina mekudeshes. Because according to Beit Shammai, we have an absolute, objective, bare bottom shear, a minimum shear for Kiddushin of a dinar. And it really doesn't matter whether she's makpedes or not makpedes. But nevertheless, the logic here is that a woman would be makpedes if she got less than a dinar. Omle Abaye, Abaye objects to Rabbi Zera Elameata, according to your logic, that a woman is makpedes, then Kigon Banse to Rabbi Yanai was very rich, and his daughters, the captain and Afshayu, they are makpidos on their kavod. V'lo makadshi v'pochas mi tirkaba de dinri. Tirkaba is miloshon trey or tlas of kabin, and there's 3 kabin of dinrei zav. Less than that, it would be an insult to marry them. It's hochinami di poshta yada v'kibla chad zuza me'acher hochinami delovi Kiddushin. Let's say she agrees, one of the Benos Rabbi Yanai, to accept a dinar. Are you going to tell me that the Kiddushin is not valid because at her level, as the daughter of a very rich person, it would be an insult to her to accept less than 3 kabim of dinrei zav? And that's impossible. The Gemara is not willing to say so, because are you telling me, according to your Svar Rabbi Zera, that a rich woman, like this example that we gave, is so makpid on a tirkava de dinri, that a pachos mi tirkava de dinri is not considered kesef as far as Kiddushin? That's not logical. Amalei, so Rabbi Zera responds to Abai, you misunderstood me. That's not really my analysis of Beit Shammai. What I meant to say was that we can assume that she would not want the Kiddushin, and she would not be happy with less than a dinar. But Pashta Yada, in your case, where she accepted less than that amount of money, the Kibla, Lo Kamina, I didn't say anything. I didn't say the Kiddushin is not valid. Even Beit Shammai would concede that the Kiddushin would be valid if she was happy with the amount of money. So therefore, if, let's say, Bas Rabbi Yanai would be willing to accept less than Shlosha Kabim of Dinrei Zav, then fine, Pashta Yada, she accepted it, she had a willing consent, and therefore the marriage is valid. Now, it could be, therefore, what Rabbi Zera is saying now in his new interpretation is that according to Beit Shammai, if she would accept a pruta, that also would be valid Kiddushin. Ki amina, but I'm talking about a case in which Beit Shammai said it's darka shalish lakpid, and there's no Kiddushin unless it's a dinar, is the Kiddush of Alayla. She didn't understand, she couldn't tell at night that she was receiving less than a dinar. And when she finds out that it's less than a dinar, then she's makpid, and therefore the Kiddushin is not chal. Inam, in other cases, the Shavi Shliach. She appointed a Shliach lekabbalah to accept the Kiddushin on her behalf. The Shliach went out and he accepted less than a dinar without asking her one way or the other. In those scenarios, that's when Beit Shammai says the Kiddushin is not valid, because min hastam, we have a right to assume, according to Beit Shammai, in a general sense, it's a woman wants to receive at least a dinar. She's not happy with Kiddushin of a pruta or anything less than a dinar. And therefore, if the Bnosov Shel Rabbi Yanai were to receive Kiddushin at night or through a Shliach, the Kiddushin would not be chal unless they were given a Tirkava de Dinri. And this is the way Rashi interprets the sugya. Tosfos raises the following objective. According to Rashi, then nosato dvarecha l'shiurim. One woman would say, well, you know what, I didn't know that it was less than a dinar. And another one would say, I don't think it was less than Tirkava de Dinri, and all the different sums and possibilities in between. It's not logical to say so. And therefore, based on this kasha, Tosfos have another interpretation of this sugya. But in any event, according to Rashi, that's where we're going to go. In Rabbi Zera's understanding of Beit Shammai, the dinar of Beit Shammai in the Mishnah is not a sheer mammon that must be given for Kiddushin, but rather it's an umdana in the das ha'isha that if she doesn't know and she didn't accept less than a dinar, it's not Kiddushin. She's mistama makpid. All this is Rabbi Zera. That's his understanding of Beit Shammai. Rav Yosef, however, suggests another interpretation of Beit Shammai. Omar, Taima de Beit Shammai, Kid Rabbi Yehuda Marav Asi, Diom Rabbi Yehuda Marasi, Kol Kesef HaOmur B'Torah Kesef Tzuri, V'Shel Devreim Kesef Medina. There are two types or two categories of currency. One is called Kesef Tzuri, that dates back to the time of the Torah. And there, the matbeos were made of pure, unadulterated silver, without any mixture of any other metals. And that's called Kesef Tzuri, which is valued as 8 times the value of the same currency, the same coin, if it was Kesef Medina. So it's a ratio, Kesef Medina to Kesef Tzuri, of 1 to 8. So Kesef Tzuri is worth 8 times the amount in the same matbea. Let's say it's a dinar. So 1 dinar in Kesef Medina is worth 8 dinrim in Kesef Tzuri. And in the case of Shel Devreim, when the Chacham require Kesef, then they mean matbea Shel Kesef Medina, which is the general matbea that's Yotzei, let's say in Yerushalayim or elsewhere, which is 1/8 of the matbea Tzurius. And now Rav Yosef says, I understand very well the shita of Beit Shammai. Beit Shammai holds that just like the Torah, when it sets up a certain amount of money that has to be given, like for example, in the Pidyon Aben you need 5 sloim, it's got to be given in a matbea that is Yotzei Pitzur, meaning it's a matbea Tzuris. And when the Torah says Kesef Stam, and it doesn't tell you exactly how much Kesef, you're going to have to give him matbea, which is Yotzei Pitzur. It's a Kesef Tzuris. And since the matbeos Tzuris are made of pure silver, there's no pruta, because a pruta by definition is made of copper, of nechoshes. And therefore, we're going to derive the following conclusion, that with regard to Kiddushin, since it's a doraisa kesef, therefore, kol kesef ha'omer b'torah kesef tzuri, and therefore a matbea of nechoshes, like a pruta, would be completely excluded by Torah law. And instead of a matbea of nechoshes, you need what's called a matbea choshev. And how much is a matbea choshev, says Beit Shammai? That's a dinar. So the cheapest matbea of kesef, which is yotzi b'tzur, is called a ma'ah. A ma'ah is the equivalent of 1/6 of a dinar. And this matbea, called a ma, was already extant at the time of the Torah. And you can check this out in Shmos Perek Lamed, Pasuk Yud Gimel, and Unkelus there. So in any event, after we see that the Torah said that it's not enough to give a pruta, because again, a pruta is not kesef tzuri by definition, because it's not made of kesef and mechoshes. So for Kiddushin Isha, the Torah excludes pruta, even though pruta has the basic definition of mammon in universal terms. But here, when the Torah requires kesef, in the case of Kiddushin, then the Torah's definition of kesef is a matbea choshuv. And what's the matbea choshuv? That's a dinar. So it comes out that according to Rav Yosef, even if she would decide, you know what, I'm willing to marry myself off for less than a dinar, the Kiddushin would not be tofes. And why is that? Because it's not kesef tzuri. Kesef tzuri requires a minimum of a dinar as a matbea choshuv. And how do we know the Torah in kesef Kiddushin requires matbea choshuv? Because the Torah, like any other requirement of kesef, requires kesef tzuri. And a shava pruta, which means a coin of nechoshes, is excluded, and it doesn't qualify as kesef. So we need a matbea choshuv. We're going to jump up to a dinar. Gufa, the Gemara now analyzes Rabbi Yehuda Rav Asi's statement called Kesef Amar Torah. Kesef tzuri shel devrei medina klolahu. Is this really in fact true? That this is a universal rule? That whenever the Torah requires kesef, it refers to either matbea that's yotzei b'tzur or shava kesef that is worth the same value if you would sell the shava kesef on the market as a matbea tzuris.